Attention, listeners. Do you ever find yourself struggling to decide what to watch on a Saturday night when you're in the mood for horror? Or perhaps you're trying to round out your own horror film education. In either case, I'm sure you'll be able to make some great discoveries in my 10 by 10 horror watch list, featuring a breakdown of the 10 favorite horror movies from 10 renowned horror directors. We did a deep dive of the favorite horror movies from directors including Guillermo del Toro, Ari Aster, Jordan Peele, Quentin Tarantino, James Gunn, Rob Zombie, Martin Scorsese, and many, many more. Here you'll find a collection of each director's favorite horror movies, along with quotes about what they appreciated about the films, all in an easy-to-reference PDF that you can download absolutely free. Featuring a mix of well-worn classics and deep cuts, hopefully you'll discover some overlooked gems and look at old classics through new lenses. Download the 10 by 10 horror watch list for free by visiting nicktaylor.com/horror guide. That's nicktaylor.com/horror guide. Welcome to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Christopher Alender and Marcos Gabriel are the writer-director duo behind The Old Ways, a fun and richly textured story about a young journalist who ventures into the jungles of Mexico to investigate a story of sorcery and healing, only to get kidnapped by a group of locals who claim her to be demonically possessed. Possessions, witchcraft, demons, and snakes, The Old Ways was not only a beautifully told story, but just a gleefully fun film. The Old Ways is now streaming on Netflix and was one of the top watched movies on the platform the week it came out, which makes sense as it was definitely one of my favorite movies of the year. I had a lot of fun with this conversation. We did the standard interview questions, but also geeked out on horror quite a bit, and I even whipped out my Aztec death whistle at one point. Anyway, please enjoy this fun and informative conversation with Christopher Alender and Marcos Gabriel. All right, Chris, Marcos, great to see you guys. How's it going?
It's great.
Fantastic. Thank you.
Good. So I really enjoyed The Old Ways. I thought there was so much that was unique and different about it, but it also seemed to touch on some, kind of established horror tropes, but in a very new, different, unique way. I mean, I guess I'm curious, how do you guys, in terms of horror subgenres, how would you categorize this movie?
Romantic comedy.
Yes.
Documentary. Horror subgenres. I mean, I guess it's a bit of an exorcism movie and a folk horror. It's
yeah, I was surprised when
witch horror.
When reviews started coming out, people were like, "We're excited about this new witch movie." I was like, "Oh, I guess it's a witch movie."
Right.
I mean, it was always an exorcism kind of riff.
Yeah.
For me, but
yeah.
Lots of witches too, so I guess it's whatever you want.
Yeah, and I mean, it feels like both genres, both witch movies and exorcism movies, are basically inexhaustible. Like, people just keep making them. But I think when you add the folk element and you integrate all of this, cultural mythology, then you just open up whole new dimensions of cool things that you can do. So I'm curious, how did the story come together? Where did this overall idea come from?
Well, I'd been trying to think of a movie that we could produce together. Chris and I, we've known each other for a long, long time, and we have similar interests and things that we're attracted to for movies. And I'd been wanting to kind of explore an exorcism space, but told from a different cultural point of view. So I was born in Puerto Rico, and I knew it'd be really exciting to do something from a Latin or Hispanic point of view. My mother told me some stories of her growing up on the island of Puerto Rico of brujas and of different spiritual cleansings, and I was raised very Catholic, and these things were so far out of reach from where I kind of grew up culturally. And so when I heard these stories from my mom, I was like, whoa, that's amazing. And it kind of took hold. And, over time, we just kept developing it and trying to think of all the exciting possibilities, in there. Like you said, it's an inexhaustible source is the exorcism story, but a lot of them kind of fall into the same kind of tropes, fall into the same kind of rhythms of, a Catholic priest comes in and says things, and here comes the Bible and all that stuff. So we knew we could challenge ourselves to do something really different with the material. And that was really the genesis of it. Just tell a story from a different point of view.
Yeah. Yeah, and as I was watching it, I realized I feel like we've never seen a non-Christian exorcism on camera. I can't think of any anyway. I mean, you could argue maybe Angel Heart, maybe elements of Serpent and the Rainbow, but other than that,
I'm trying to think. Like, was the Wailing? Remember the Wailing? That was that an exorcism? They had like cool ritualistic things, but I don't remember those.
Could have been like would that be a Buddhist exorcism? Since it was where was that?
Perhaps.
Maybe.
And that was fun. And the fun was researching brujas and santeria and all that stuff, where it's like the practitioner, and Chris has a lot more to say about this, but the practitioner is really the one who determines the process. There's not really a guidebook for it. It's really, what are some of the things we found in the research, Chris?
Well, I mean, that was really liberating because we weren't, I mean, at first it's kind of daunting because it's like, well, what is it? How does this work? But then we would just read and Google like crazy and talk to different people. Almost everybody we talked to of like Latinx heritage has a pretty close story to something, like my mom or my aunt or my cousin, or it's always something like that. So we got lots of just feedback and input from lots of different directions. And the more we learned, the more we realized that we actually had the freedom to pick and choose what we wanted, because that's exactly what all of these brujos and brujas do. We would start to find things that we really wanted to have in the movie, and from different cultures throughout Latin America and Central America and Southern America and the Caribbeans. And what we really then had to do was just focus it in on where this would happen. Like, what was a good place geographically where all of the things we wanted to exist made sense. So we landed on the area of Veracruz, which is on the kind of southern little boot of Mexico on the Caribbean side. So it's right where the kind of northern edge of the Mayan Empire overlapped with the southern edge of Aztec. And then you have the Afro-Caribbean influence coming across the water. And you have obviously Catholic and Spanish influence from Colombian imperialism. And we're really able to zero in on that area and pick and choose these specific influences that we wanted to flesh out the story and the kind of the richness of everything. So it was really cool to be able to not have that dogma weighing over our head of like, well, it has to be like this because this is the way it is in the Bible. And it's like our bruja would use pieces from the Bible, but she'd also use, they've got goats in their village, so that's what they're going to use for nourishment. And they just kind of like piece it together based on their experience and their history. And that's kind of also where this other element of the story that has this red book that we think of as, it's kind of like the Bible in our movie, but it's a one of a kind document that's been handed down from generation to generation, almost like a family cookbook or something like that, where everybody's penciled in. Well, I saw this, or so and so came in with a stomach ache, and I gave her this, and that made her feel better. But she threw up for 5 days, or whatever that is.
A very dangerous family cookbook.
It's the worst family cookbook. But it really spoke to all the different influences that we could inject into it, and kind of do whatever we wanted in a way, and just try to make the most exciting and fresh experience for the audience that we could. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it was largely like the mythology that you guys created was an amalgam of like actual folk myths and certain religious practices, just all in its own, very unique brew, so to speak.
Another thing we did a lot was look into anthropological history and museum type literature and stuff like that, and look at actual artifacts that were found in Aztec and Mayan ruins, and use that. Like, for instance, they would take like royal children's skulls and they would elongate them.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Which is, and they have the skulls, the real skulls, they found in tombs and stuff like
They
that.
elongate them.
It's almost like, have you seen in Africa, they do that sometimes with the neck.
Yep.
They've stretched out, or in other cultures they do like foot binding and things. So the skulls are horrifying looking, and we saw that, and that was really inspiring. And then we saw they also would drill into their teeth, and they still have the teeth. They have them now where there were jewels and stones stuck into their teeth, almost like grills, and and we saw other types of headdresses and things like that were really interesting. And we, some people might think that those were invented by a priest or a cleric or whoever, but we just tried to work the opposite direction and say, well, what if somebody saw a deity or a demon or something that looked like that, and this has all been in an effort to recreate a quote unquote real presence. So that all worked as our fodder for building what the actual demon would look like, and we would base it on all of that type of anthropological type stuff that really just helped. It was just great. Once you could find something to latch onto, you could really focus on it and steer the ship in a direction, and it was easy to get everybody on board and to follow along and riff on it and explore those different ideas.
Really and the script really, it was really a living document for a lot of this stuff. So a draft was written, and that would start like our, explorations into like, let's do a little more research here. Let's find something else here. And then we'd find something really cool. Like in the movie, there's something called a death whistle, which was something we found through our research.
I have one.
You have one?
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
I'll bring it out after like 2 seconds.
Awesome. Yeah. So
tell.
we saw people playing that online, and we were like, oh my God, let's put this in the script somewhere. So we not only integrated into the script right away, but then pretty much instantly called like Ben Lovett, our composer that we knew we were going to be using because we're good friends with Ben from a number of years, and was like, hey, Ben, you're going to be finding ways to incorporate this sound into the soundtrack. So really it started in the script, but the script was always absorbing new information that was then leading into the movie. So that was really thrilling and exciting to keep finding ways to make it authentic and make it real.
Yeah, that's really cool. Throughout the course of the research and writing process, were there any, with the subject matter of things relating to demons and witches and curses and spells, you can go down certain dark corridors and things can get a little scary during the research process. Was there any either documents or anything that you guys came across where you were like, okay, we can't go any further. We gotta chill with the research.
There was certainly, there's some rituals we didn't end up putting in the movie. There's something that is in, I think there's even a documentary on Netflix about it right now called John the Healer or something like that. But this guy in South America that does eye scrapings with like a blade, and he'll scrape the eye for clarity and cleansing. And we thought for a little while, like, maybe we'll put this in the movie, and then realized, like, I don't know. There's so much other body trauma and horror in this movie. We thought we'll probably lose the audience if we go this far. Certainly felt like icky when we were doing it. As we looked into, there's a psychic surgery sequence in the movie, which reveals this strange kind of thing from inside of her body. And, in the movie, there's some like demon teeth in there, but that was certainly a bit of research that we went down the wrong rabbit holes looking at, like, what was that called, Chris? Or
these were
not melanoma. What are they called?
These are loosely based on these like cancerous kind of non-dangerous growths that they've found inside of people that they pull out, and the DNA is in there, and it actually would grow
teeth and hair and everything.
And it's horrifying. And God, I forgot the name of that.
I know something. I don't wanna
It's
say
almost the
wrong
same word as melanoma, but it's
Yeah.
anyway, Google it.
Okay.
Right.
Google teeth
but,
sack.
Yeah, I dare you. Turn off safe search and Google that.
But it's funny too. It's like, I don't know if there was a lot of stuff necessarily that scared us in the research. Quite the contrary, because we'd be like more thrilled when we were like, oh my God, this is really creepy. This happened, or this ritual is really crazy. But, as it started coming to life and as our prop master started making some of the things that were in the movie, that certainly, like, his corner of the set was terrifying, and they're full of bones and like really weird things that certainly felt like it had a presence to it.
Yeah.
But it was so funny, man. Like, he'd go out to lunch and get a rotisserie chicken for lunch and eat it, and then there'd be a necklace made of chicken bones, and you're like, oh, all right. That's where that came from.
Resourceful.
Yeah, that was Derek. He was great.
That's awesome.
He's from New Mexico, so he brought all kinds of coyote skulls.
Oh, that's awesome.
Random stuff that he probably found on the side of the road. Very resourceful guy.
Put it all on the screen.
Yeah, that was the little haunted room where his gack was.
Yeah.
He actually did, while we were shooting, he answered a Craigslist ad because someone was giving away, I think for free, this horrifying like sculpture that they had in the yard that spewed, like, it was designed to spew blood or something. Whoa. And he was so excited, but the person was giving it away because it was like, the headline was like, haunted thing, I can't have this around anymore. Please, someone take it. And he was like, oh my God, I got to go grab this.
Oh, holy shit. Did he take it?
He did.
Is it in his house now? Like, what's happening?
Yeah. Whoa. I mean, it was on the set for a while, and then he
died.
R.I.P. He died
after killing his gerbils. Yeah. Wow. That's pretty insane.
That is unfortunately true. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. I feel like the cool thing about, I think, dealing particularly with Mexico and Mexican culture is they're way more straightforward about talking about things like ghosts and demons and afterlife and things like that than most, Americans are. I mean, you watch most American ghost movies, it's you don't see or hear about the ghosts till like a third of the way through because they have to get over this sort of hump of, believability. Whereas you watch these amazing horror movies coming out of Southeast Asia, like you were talking about, what were you talking about? The Wailing. Yeah, which I think is Malaysian. But the horror that comes out of Malaysia and Indonesia and even Korea, I mean, culturally in Indonesia, they talk about demons and ghosts like it is in a part of everyday life. Yeah. So their ghost movies, they just start off with shit coming out of the walls and the ghosts are visible and all of that. But I think when you have like something like Mexican culture where they do talk about brujas and spells and demons and things like that. So I thought that from that perspective, it's a more open playing field for a horror movie, it feels like. Oh,
certainly. I mean, there is like everybody, culturally, what it is. If someone just says, oh, I need to do a cleansing or I need to get the house cleansed or blessed, or, sometimes there's a ritual with an egg. I mean, those are things that just are part of the language. And I remember that was one of the things that was fascinating when my mom would talk about her growing up in Puerto Rico. Like, there would be if something happened, maybe someone put a curse on you or a hex on you, or someone would find like dried grapes on their front porch and they'd say, somebody just cursed me. And then someone else would say, I think the dog might have taken the grapes from the garbage. but it was like
a Sicilian message.
It wasn't a stretch to go like, or perhaps someone might be cursing you with this thing. So I know that's what was so exciting and vibrant. And really, the idea is, those kind of thoughts and beliefs have disappeared greatly recently. And that's to me, that's one of the connotations of the old ways. It's like these things exist. And in our movie, there are people who practice ways to fight against it or to stand against it. But those ways are going to disappear the more we don't believe in them and the more we let them kind of fall away. So really, that was, at the core of it is a character who has been greatly distanced from their culture, who's been greatly distanced from believing any of these things. And even when the evidence is right in front of her, she has a really hard time coming to grips with it. And then, but it's real in our movie.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And for your aspiring filmmakers, I mean, this is, I think, the perfect example of that write what you know adage, where it's like Marcus has never been kidnapped, and
Yeah.
as far as I know, and forced to drink goat milk and all this stuff. But it's coming from a kind of a personal insight or a personal
Yeah.
place or
Yeah.
a anecdote from his family that stuck with him for many, many years. And then you just start springboarding off that and combining it with things you do know or things, tropes and twists and stuff like that. But it's I think a great example of that, that you hear that when you're young and you're like, well, nobody wants to see a movie about ordering groceries during the pandemic.
Right.
That's not the right what you know that we want to see.
Yeah.
But find that thing that probably doesn't even seem special to you till you're a little bit older anyway, because it's something you grew up with. And you realize
Right.
the more people you meet, you're like, oh, this is different about me. And there's a universality that you start to see from it
Right.
too. So it's
Yeah.
kind of, you find how those two sides can kind of come and meet together in the middle, and you've got something hopefully worth telling.
Yeah, just having these
a
different
great point.
perspectives and different cultural viewpoints, I think, it refreshes the genre. So
Oh
nicely.
yeah, and like I mean, so there was so much that we tried to imbibe into the script. There was so much that our producer, one of our producers, Krista Barini, who's from Guatemala, she brought to the script. And then once you like open that up a little further into our, makeup artist who is Latina, into our amazing Latinx cast, and you just give enough hooks in that everyone can then bring their own story or something true to them to it. It was just so awesome. And that was one of the great things about Chris as a director, is just how receptive and collaborative he was across all spectrums. Like, I know because I've been friends with him since we've been 19 years old. I mean, now we're in our 40s, we have kids and all that's not together. But we have, grown up together. So I've always known how collaborative Chris can be and is. And when you see that operating on the actors level, on the art direction level, on the props with the cinematographer, it's really amazing to just receive a lot of different ideas and people who say, I want to make this my own. And that's what, filmmaking is really, it's the ultimate collaborative experience. And it works best when you bring together artisans and craftsmen and artists that you trust, that have a point of view, and you let them do their thing and you guide them in the right direction. And then you see what happens when everyone's doing their best work.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like it's so important to be able to create a collaborative environment on set and in every stage of production, production and even post, so everybody can bring their sort of unique
and certainly
A-game.
when you're making an indie movie, like no one's doing it for the money.
Right.
So the only reason people signed on is because like they read the script and they were like, this could be cool, and I think I have some ideas for it, and that's why I'll do it for very little money.
Yeah.
And then you have to embrace that, and you have to go like, okay, great. Like I agree with your point of view here, and I think we can go in this point of view here. And you have to be collaborative, especially at this level. Otherwise, like, why is anyone doing it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and for them, payment for them a lot of times is just the creative freedom or the ability to have their voice stand out, or
Exactly.
be a department head for the first time, or whatever it might be. But they're getting an opportunity that is more than cash, because we didn't have that
Right.
for them. So,
well, how did the movie get made? Can you talk about, like, after you guys had the script written, what was the process for getting the movie made?
Well, we have a production company in Burbank called Soapbox Films, where we mostly do advertising, commercials, and marketing for the studios for feature films. And it's close to, I think it's 19 years old now. We've been building it since 2002, and it's a pretty big place now. We've got about 50 employees. We have a small soundstage, editing bays, audio, storyboard artist, all this stuff. And we use it every day for making big commercials where we spend the budget of our movie in a day. A lot of times,
Several
maybe
times.
sometimes more so. And
Yeah.
but the dream has always been to make movies and make our own projects. So as the company started snowballing and kind of getting all these different resources and talented people and vendor relationships and crew relationships. We've just tried to cultivate the best people and the best opportunities that we can. And I raised some money a few years ago, and I produced. We've done quite a few films, either as executive producers or producers in some capacity. But we raised our own financing and did 3 films back to back to back. One was The Wind. The first one was The Wind, which is also available on Netflix now. The second one was Body at Brighton Rock, written, directed by Roxanne Benjamin, who you may know from lots of cool things like VHS. And we did another movie called Wildcat that just came out through Paramount and Saban Films. And that one was the first time we had made a movie, really the first time we'd done an independent film on our soundstage, not on location. And because most indie films, it's just like you got to go somewhere and film it because you don't have the money to do it on a stage, and building a set is very expensive. Renting the space is very expensive. So we've always, The Wind was out in the middle of Santa Fe, New Mexico. Body at Brighton Rock was on the side of a mountain in Idlewild. We've done just all over the place, and it's always extremely challenging. And there's a lot of uncontrollable factors, especially when you don't have the money to control the factors like weather or travel expenses are really take a big chunk out of a small budget.
Or just additional time, like you have to make sure you're getting all your pages done every day. And if any setback happens, you're like completely thrown when you're on location as well.
Yeah. Even The Wind, which was like probably the best case scenario for a movie that was out in the middle of nowhere. Like we really only had to drive like 40 minutes from where we were staying in Santa Fe every day. But that's 30 or 40 minutes in, 30, 40 minutes out.
Right.
You got to kind of like unpack everything when you get to the place. We had to walk half a mile from where you parked, and you lose, conservatively 2 hours a day, but you probably lose more than that. And that over a week, that's easily Gesundheit.
Thank you. Pardon me.
Over a week, that's a day,
Yeah.
And on a small schedule, especially on if you're doing 18 days sometimes on these movies, that you're talking 8 pages a day. If you lose a day a week, that's 8 pages of stuff you could have filmed. So that's all a long way of saying the last film we did was called Wildcat, and it was a kind of a chamber drama, essentially one room. So we built that on our stage, and we were making this film, and it was the best experience. It's like, okay, Charlie Chaplin figured this out 100 years ago. Like this is how you make movies. And we'd show up at 7:00 call time. We'd have our first shot off by 7:18. At the end of the day, you throw a tarp over the camera and lock the door and walk away, and you're good to go. And we were just getting so many more takes, so much more material, so much more time with the actors. You weren't burnt out at the end of the week
because of the soundstage.
We weren't going into overtime every night, and because every time you go into overtime, then you got to add turnaround if you're following just basic human decency rules. Like people need time to sleep. An on location film, you start like Monday. Maybe you have 6 a.m. call time. But because you're like losing time every day even if your main crew wraps out, there's still other people like grips and PAs and people who have to stay and make sure everything gets shut down and cleaned up and taken away. So your call time doesn't get to happen until after they're all done for the next day. So by the end of the week, your call time might be noon and you're shooting until midnight. And then by the time you get home on Saturday morning, you get home at 1 or 2 in the morning, and then you sleep all day. You lose that whole day, so you're just destroyed by the end of the movie because you're just losing sleep and you're losing time. You don't have the weekend you don't have any time to prep, and so Marcus and I looked at each other while we were making Wildcat, and we're like, man, we gotta write a movie that we can shoot here, and we gotta reuse these walls, and we gotta figure out what we can do to do this, because those 3 films that I produced back to back were all first time directors, and there's just so many X factors that are coming at you on any film, and when you add to it that you're a first time director, it's just like you want to find every opportunity you can to eliminate things that are going to sink the ship.
Yeah.
And we own this stage. It's a small stage, but we owned it. It's there, and we can build on it, and we can prep on it, and nobody's going to kick us out. And so Marcus just like went into the other room and started writing a movie that we could shoot on the stage. And
I think my plan was to like quickly write a draft, and if I could do it fast enough, we could just like start production right after the film wrapped, which of course wasn't going to happen, but it was very much like the excitement of seeing it and how we could do it, and pairing it up with this idea that had been slowly kind of gestating in my mind for a while was like, okay, wait, I can see it. So at first we thought, okay, we'll just do it in one room and we'll spend a lot of time, and then we'll shut down production and we'll change the colors of the walls, and then we'll shoot another scene, and we'll have 5 different rooms, but it'll all be the same room. And we had a lot of ambitious ideas on how to do it. We ended up doing it in a totally different way once we got going into it. But yeah, it was so thrilling to see the movie, being on the other set and being like, okay, cool, we can totally pull this off in a different way and make it our own and make it pretty exciting.
So Old Ways was shot primarily on a soundstage.
Yeah.
Yep.
Whoa.
22 of 25 days. Is that right?
Wow.
23 of 25 days.
I could have sworn you shot on location. I was going to ask, like, what was it like shooting in the jungle?
We did for 2 days, for a couple of days.
Yeah.
It was great because we only did 2 days. It was
wow.
It was great. We being on a stage, and the other thing that after having produced quite a few indie films in various capacities, the thing I wanted most as a first time, we made a movie when we were in college, but this is our first real movie. Mm-hmm. I basically would have traded anything for more days. Just the more days you can get, the better, because you can get away every now and then with 6, 7, 8 page days, or even 10-page days if it's a bunch of dialogue or something. But every time we get to the climax of a film and you try to squeeze it into half a day, it just sucks. It ruins the movie, and you waited all this time for this set piece or whatever it is, and you got to start shooting it like it's the Avengers. It's like they do one shot in a day sometimes,
right?
And then we'd have not only the climax, but we had lots of animals in this movie. We had a huge snake sequence, so like our own experiences had told us, like, okay, we're gonna have to spend an entire day on just this one scene that might just be a few pages or a page. And really that's the advantage. We knew that going in, that we needed to schedule more and more time to pull it all off. And then just, thank you so much for the kind words on not knowing it was shot on a stage, because all of it is pretty hard to pull off, because you don't get anything for free. So on a location, you get environments for free, you get everything. So when you shoot on a stage, Chris and the DP Adam Lee really had a lot of discussions about, like, how do you light it so it feels like we're on location? Where will we put the camera? Like, you have the ability on a stage to move any light you want and move a wall if you want to. But there's all of those things add up to the audience's mind as like, some things aren't working and it doesn't feel right. So there was a very purposeful intent on not moving walls and not doing a lot of specialty lighting. Because you'd want to find, how did Apocalypse Now get shot? Like, how do you find a shot in a jungle? And then how do you also create? I mean, we had haze going all the time. Our whole poor crew pre-COVID already had masks on all the time because we had haze going all the time. We had different things before we'd take a set, before we'd roll cameras. Someone would shake these things in the air and create those little particles that float in the air in front of the camera. All that stuff is like free on location. And when you're on a stage, it can be very sterile and very so we'd make sure everyone was misted up and sweaty and you felt it. I mean, when you walked around that set, it did feel like you were somewhere lost in the jungle, and that was remarkable.
Yeah, and the level of detail that set had, I was sure you found somewhere just way off the beaten path, either somewhere in South or Central America, and just stayed there. But yeah, I mean, could you talk about the production design? It was beautiful. There was like an economy of kind of color, but the main bruja kind of shaman her look was so cool and so striking and iconic, and it was not over the top, but it was super powerful. So, I mean, I feel like there was such nuance to production design. Can you talk about how you worked with your production designers and what their approach was, particularly on a lower budget, because the production design just sang.
Oh, great.
Awesome.
Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you.
I mean, like he said, originally we conceived this as we would build one room and redress it like 5 times. And it was a good idea, I guess. But it would have felt,
very small.
Small and redundant. And we learned a lot on that previous film that was like a single room movie. And we weren't trying to hide that it was, that was the whole idea. Like there was a person being held captive. But in this one, we really wanted to just try to avoid it feeling like we were looking at a proscenium. I wanted there to always feel like there was just as much life on the other side of the lens as there was on the side that you could see. So when we were interviewing production designers, one of them came to us and said, I've got an idea for how we can still only have 4 walls, because that's all we could afford. That's one of the most expensive parts, is putting up like actual real
Physical
walls, because you have to bring in carpenters and there's wood and there's just materials and stuff.
They got to be secure. They're very heavy. They can't fall over.
Yeah. And they got to look good. So there's a lot of labor costs and material costs for that. So he's like, I've got an idea how we can just have 4 walls. We can reuse the 4 pieces you have from your other movie. But I'm going to build the entire complex, all the rooms that we had to kind of combine one of them, but basically everything that's called for in the script as one standing thing. And he's like, he'd worked on a lot of, actually a surprising amount of movies that were in a jungle, like one of the Anaconda movies. I think he did one of the, like one of those random Dungeons and Dragons movies that had like the Wayans brothers or something.
Have not seen that.
And he's like, I can't remember which one. Huge set piece that's like in I don't know if it's a sinkhole or it's just like this giant cave hole in the earth, huge, like 4 stories tall and mud sliding down it and all kinds of stuff. Really expensive, $1 million or whatever just for this set. And he's like, it took us a month to build it. All the labor, all the wood, all the infrastructure. It's a huge thing. When you look at like behind it, it's like a giant scaffolding structure. And he's like, at the end of the day, all you saw on camera was the vines and some of the rocks and stuff. And he's like, I've always thought like that was so wasteful, or like that's a wasteful way to do it. So what he did is he took a couple of our walls that we had, but then everything else was like tricks. If this one wall was going to have a shelf on it, like a big shelf with all these jars of like, frog eyes or whatever. He's like, you're not going to see the wall. Like,
right.
Even if it's a see-through shelf, like, if it doesn't have a back to it, like you're not going to see the wall really. There's going to be all this junk on it. So what he would do there, you get a big shelf, fill it with junk, and then hang. He would get for free somewhere. There's some place where you can get free coffee bags. I guess you go to coffee stores or something. I don't know. Like they throw them out. He would just get big. They're like burlap sacks, and he would dye them brown or something, and just hang them behind the shelf. And then he'd throw some like vines and just other junk he found on the side of the road, and you had no idea that you weren't looking at a wall, because you were never going to look at the wall. You were going to look at all the cool little jars of crud and magic ingredients and stuff like that. So
he made us like rethink walls too, because there's a, in the main room where Christina, our main character, is held most of the time, he decided, what if this one wall was made of bamboo sticks and was more like a cage almost? And that was mind-blowing, because A, it just saved on a lot of materials. B, we could now see now that he designed this entire complex, you could see through the wall into the rest of the complex the rest of the time. And in a horror movie, that is like such a gift, because you do look for things in the shadows or in the corners of the shot. And to be able to see that forced us again, like, to rethink elements of the story and go like, hold on, does this scene even work anymore? Because now she can see it. Okay, we got to rewrite that. Or, oh my God, isn't this awesome? Now when someone's standing on the other side of this door that's also kind of see-through this mesh, we can actually see someone physical there and not just like hear them on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was such a brilliant notion that he had that I don't think he'd been able. He'd said it was something he thought of for years, and he just had never. Because you wouldn't do that on a real movie. On a real movie, you'd be like, just build the walls, right. Put the carpenters to work. But he had that theory, and it was like brilliant. Yeah. And it was one that would like mess your mind up when you first started seeing it come together. And it was totally just like we were talking about earlier, that element of trust when you bring artists and artisans together. Like, you just had to be like, okay, I can't see any of this now, because it was just like hanging palm fronds, and like someone would be stuffing newspapers into a lattice and painting them colors, and you're like, what is that, a wall? What is that? And it was just texture and feeling and color and tone that through the lens with a little bit of depth of field there, you suddenly were like, oh my God, it's all come to life.
Trust the process.
It was a real exercise of a principle that another friend of mine that I've been making movies with since we were like middle school, this guy Jacob Gentry, he has a movie out right now called Broadcast Signal Intrusion. I produced a movie with him that was like a Blade Runner-ish future punk thing.
Nice.
And in that film we came to the conclusion that like you just can't have enough. There's no such thing as too much art department like set design stuff, because you walk onto the set and you see everything all at once and you're like, that's a lot of stuff. But then when you aim your camera at it, all you see is what's in the frustum of the lens, and you have no idea that there's 2 million books on the left and the right. It might as well not be there. So it's like you gotta go big, and if you're gonna if that's part of the storytelling is your environment, then you almost gotta overdo it. It's easy to pull stuff out when you're looking through the lens and say, oh, this is too much. Let's get rid of that weird, Jesus statue that is distracting me or whatever. But we just went crazy with the amount of stuff here, because the idea was this Bruja, she doesn't accept money as payment from people. She does it for the love of helping people or whatever. So the villagers would just bring her offerings as thank you, and she's just got this place full of, it's a junk farm basically. So our whole art department team, and in particular Bryce, the production designer, would just show up every day on set and be like, look what I found, this toilet on the side of the street. It was free. Can you believe it? I was like, yeah.
Or there's the bed that Christina is on. Like, I think in the script it was just like, oh, a mattress on the ground was what the description was, or something like that. And he found this like beautiful wood piece with a woven thing. And suddenly again, it was like, well, hold on. If she's strapped to this, it's heavy, but she can move it. Okay, well, hold on. She can drag this around if we want her to and get in different positions.
Yeah, that was really
awesome.
That was really liberating when we discovered that we basically turned the bed into a ball and chain.
Yeah.
So it's like, you can move wherever you want. Good luck running through the jungle with a 150-pound
but again,
bed
that's like
strapped to you. And so it let us get her off the wall, which would make it started it would just start to feel too flat if we were just filming someone up against a wall. So it let us get her into the middle of the room and the other side of the room, and it gave us a lot more variety with these blocking and the staging.
Yeah. And again, this is like the beauty of shooting it on our stage was we could see this as it was happening. So as the set's going up or as props are coming in or set dressings coming in, we can plan around it and make adjustments to it. But also it allowed Chris and Adam and his first AD, Kelsey, an opportunity to literally pre-shoot the movie on like iPads and cell phones, plan out every shot in the actual space. So if you're on location, you're going to show up on the day and be like, okay, yeah, that corner looks good. And this thing, and this is different than the blocking I was thinking. Instead, this was an opportunity to come in there and really just plan shot by shot the entire movie. And yeah, on the day, it all changes. And an actor is like, I'm not going to stand there. Why would I look out that window? I'm going to stand over here. And you're like, okay, we'll figure it out. But most of the big things that need to be figured out could be figured out actually in the physical space. I mean, it'd be like shooting in your childhood home. You know, you'd be like, oh, okay, this is the shower. You go up the ladder, and up the ladder, there's the laundry room. So we'll be out the laundry room, and then we'll come over here, and that's where my playpen is. So that's how we'll do it.
Yeah.
It was very much like that kind of familiarity with the set.
Really, really cool. And I feel like a lot of what you just talked about speaks to the importance of kind of having a fluid relationship with a lot of your collaborators. In other words, being open to new opportunities that present themselves and being malleable enough with how you rewrite certain scenes, like talking about the whole device of the bed turning into a ball and chain, just being, instead of being so rigidly attached to your original conceptions of things, finding the opportunities to be, open to new ideas that present even, bigger, cooler possibilities than you had originally anticipated. I feel like a lot of people are so just, nope, it's in the script. We're going to do it like this. And this is my storyboard. But I think the fluid collaboration, it sounds like, is the name of the game, which is in your case.
I mean,
I do have a lot of friends, filmmaker friends, who've been kind of screwed over by storyboards, and they're scared of them sometimes because they're like, well, we get to set and then everybody says this is what the storyboard is. And it's like, it's fine. I mean, just do as much planning as you can, because even if you throw it all out, it still was planning. Like, it still helps.
Yeah, who is it that said like plans are useless, but the act of planning is completely valuable? It was like Roosevelt or somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even just, little thing where it's like 2-3 weeks out, we're able to talk to our stunt choreographer, and she knows where this is going to happen, what kind of wires she's going to need, where she's going to need to, pin harness points into the ceiling or the ground, and all these little things that you're not scrambling to answer on the day. And,
right.
And like you said, I mean, half the time the actors would show up and be like, the opposite. And you're like, okay. But it's like, still, you don't have to throw out everything. You throw out half of it, or sometimes storyboards look the same. It doesn't matter. They weren't drawn that
right.
It's like, okay, well, we're spinning everything 180 degrees, but it's the same, essentially. So the more you can get in there, and then like you said, finding those happy accidents and experimenting on set is what makes it the fun. The thing that when we were kids, we were making movies, and that's all you did. You didn't plan at all. You just went in the backyard with the water gun and started hosing everybody down. And it gives you the opportunity to do that stuff because you're not panicked when you're not. You can show up the set and you've got the baseline taken care of, and now you can riff a little bit.
It's like if you have
the safety net behind you of your actual planning and the communication that comes from that when you're trying to tell. That's another problem I think a lot of young or beginning filmmakers have, is they've never had to work with a 60-person crew.
Right.
If they were running the camera and they were holding the microphone with their other hand and doing this, like, they've never had to explain themselves to so many different people who need. I mean, it's crazy how much work these department heads do. Like our wardrobe designer, she's had to think out things that I've never, and I haven't. I've produced lots of movies, and I've never really thought about the stuff that they do until I was in all the meetings with her. But there's one pair of clothes basically for actress, but she doesn't just wear one pair of clothes in the real world.
Right.
Like we have 10, and on day 12, she's got to be, a bucket of goat milk has to be dumped on her. But on day 2, that hasn't happened yet, but
Right.
she's got blood, and she's got this. So, and she's got to get sweatier and grosser over time, and so she's thought about the same way an actor thinks about their arc. Like, this is happening for the wardrobe, and this is happening for the makeup, and this is happening for the set, and this is happening for everything. And those people, you can't just show up and be like, good luck,
right?
Because there's a lot of thought that has to go on their part, and you're just making their lives very difficult and very stressful if you can't give them as much information as possible, because they've got a lot to do. They've got to go shop for it. She would come to me and be like, do you want 11 or 13 shirts? And I'm like, I've never, anytime I've made a movie, I got one, I'm like, we get more than one? That's amazing. So I'm like, I don't even know how to answer that question, but let's talk it through and see, because that's amazing that we're going to have multiples of anything.
And then we could have had 22 or 26, it wasn't, we could have had way more. And
then every single one of those, like, well, what? I'm like, well, can I have 13? And she's like, yeah, but then we can only have 2 of this thing for this stunt scene. Do you think you can get away with only destroying one shirt for that scene? I'm like, yeah, sure. If I can have 13 for, or whatever, but you're just, you're beg, borrowing, stealing from every.
Yeah. You need people with these
item.
Systems thinking on your crew.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So last few questions. I feel when you're working on an indie movie that's relatively low budget, where would you say are the areas to invest? Because clearly there's certain areas, certain things you have to skimp on, but then there's other things in order for the movie to really work that you have to really invest in.
Yeah. For me, it's time. I mean, because I've made a lot of movies that were like 12 days, 18 days, 20 days, get as many days as you can.
Yeah.
And try to get 5-day weeks instead of 6-day weeks. That is the biggest, because that's time is money. You're spending, $10,000 a day, $100,000 a day, $1 million a day. But if whatever that is, can you shave 10% off every day somehow and get 1 more day or 2 more days? You'll be really, really happy. The more, because it's really just getting that page count down. Like, if you're shooting 3 or 4 pages a day, you can actually do some really great stuff. If you're shooting 6, 8, 10 pages every single day,
you're just capturing stuff.
You're just getting footage, and you'll have some good stuff. I'm not doubting it. I've seen people have done amazing films in a few days, but those extra days are gonna turn into more takes, better takes, more rest, better prep, less angry people. I mean, it'll be everything. So if it means, hey, can we get away? Is there a way to shoot this with a smaller crew? That might be worth it if it means you get 2-3 more days instead of 10-12 more people, because every person that shows up is, even on the low end, a couple $100 a day, plus the food you have to feed them, plus if you're on location, you have to pay for some place for them to stay, you have to fly them out there or drive them out there, per diems, yada yada yada. It just keeps going on, and I couldn't have been, I'd take more, but this was the first time I'd had 25 days on a movie, and it was a whole different world.
And you said 5-day weeks, not 6-day weeks. It's important for people to have 2 days of rest.
Yeah, because especially if you're on location, because that 1 day of rest isn't a day of rest. It's not a day of recuperation. It's like you're sleeping, on Saturday, because you're probably going late. Like we only went in overtime once or twice on this.
Oh, wow.
But most indie films, especially if you've got a few amount of days, how are you going to get 8 pages in a day? You're going to go 3 hours late. And then you go 3 hours late the next day and the next day, and then your weekend's gone. you've got Sunday barely to just like wake up and like do your laundry, and you're not seeing your family or anything. You're not prepping. You're not getting a chance to look at assemblies of the edit, seeing what stuff you've missed or failed at or whatever. It just all adds up, and without a doubt, I would just
More days.
beg, borrow, and steal to get more days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can help it, I'll never shoot less than 30 from now on. Like even 25 was pushing it. Yeah.
Like I think and if you're making a movie like our movie, let's say a horror movie or something genre, I mean, I would say limit your scope and try to do things as practically as possible. Chris and I both, Chris more so than me, but have we can do visual effects and we can do some comping and stuff like that. But we knew for this movie, we wanted to be as practical as possible. So we were always thinking like, what is the puppet we're going to build for this? Or what's the like practical effect that we're going to do? Because we've worked on enough stuff, maybe not our own stuff, but other people who are like, hey, we're just going to add this and then there'll be fire and then this explosion. And then it's just like, man, we'll make it as good as we can, but it's still not as good as if like you just did a different type of shot and shot it real, because you're there with the DP and you're there in the real location. And it's like, you can make it look awesome in the lens. And if you can get it most of the way there and just like hit it up a little bit more. I mean, our kind of approach was certainly practical first, and then anything in the script that we knew was just a little beyond it. It was kind of written with like, this is 10 to 20% more than we naturally know how to do, so I think we'll be able to stretch and reach and get there, but we never, there's so many movies.
Not 100%. Like
not 100%. Yeah. We were never like, there's a 50-foot tall creature that's fully, and it's going to do, and it's like, well, we could try, but we know that's like 80% away from what we are comfortable doing.
Right.
And I've seen way too many of these movies where, you get to the end and you're just like, God, that's a disappointment. And you know that the filmmakers are like, yeah, we just couldn't do it. And they knew that in the writing stage. They knew they didn't know how to pull it off. They knew they wouldn't be able to, but they were kind of hoping like, but in the computer, we'll figure it out.
Fix it in post.
We'll figure out what it is. And for us, it's like, we went in our creature. We always intended to be totally practical effect. Awesome. But at the end of it, we said, once we saw the footage and we were like, okay, cool. That creature could have used another couple of tens of thousands, maybe $100,000 to really be what we wanted. So we had to CG enhance it a little bit. But again, that was in that like 10 to 20% range where it's like, I know we can replace this, or I know we can, or Chris knew he could like play around with that and figure out how to do it. But the whole time it was like, all right, let's really do it in camera as much as possible. So I would advise that, because, even if we went out with a non-CG version of this movie, it'd be okay. It wouldn't be what it is, but it'd be like, yeah, that's watchable. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. The other thing I'd spend, and this is free, but you just got to put in the legwork, is if it is like a horror movie, like what you would expect with like kind of a set piecey ending, action ending, do like animatic, pre-shoot it, do everything you can to make sure that climax actually works.
Right.
And don't count on it working out on the day, because you'll forget something, or it just won't, and even in this movie, I drew it. I edited it. I pre-shot it, and I still feel like I didn't necessarily do enough to really get it to where I wanted it. I think it worked out. I think it's fine. I think people like it. But it's happened on every movie I've ever done. Like, it's like, I've never been like, you know what I did? Plenty.
Enough.
Like I totally nailed it.
And that's something you can do. Tremendous amount already. Yeah.
So and that's something you can do with prep. Like really make that last. Anytime you've got like a thing where, if the enjoyment of the movie is hinging on like this paying off or whatever that is at the end, like don't leave it to chance. Do it with action figures, or if you can draw, or if you can use Unreal Engine or Cinema 4D or Blender or whatever. Like, make as many versions of it as you can with the music and the editing. Like, do it up so that it really, really works. Because not only will you'll discover things you wouldn't have thought of in the just storyboarding or just trying to shoot it with shot lists, but it will actually, you can save time, because if you know, like, I just need 8 frames of somebody flailing their arm or whatever. It's like, well, maybe I can do that on a different day. I don't need all my actor. I don't even need my actor. It could be anybody's arm or whatever that is. There'll be ways that you can take the load off that day, which is going to be the most stressful day of the shoot, because you've got whatever, a monster, or you're shooting a bucket of blood all over the place, or all those things. The more you can take off that and make sure that there's nothing left to chance, the happier you'll be.
Yeah.
And speaking of buckets of blood, we discovered there's an amazing independent horror movie trick that you can do now, that they make puddles of blood that look amazing, that are just silicone. Silicone. So it's like a rubber mat.
Oh, brilliant.
Like those, like,
throw
fake
it down.
Remember, like the fake
I remember
vomit,
the fake vomit, and the fake like coffee spill on a CD and all that stuff.
Exactly.
Ice creams.
Yeah, you can go to people, or you can just have someone make it, like these puddles of blood. And
I just want them in my house now.
Yeah,
put them on the wall.
Yeah,
that sounds
because
cool.
Cleaning up, doing multiple takes of like a bloody scene is very time consumptive.
Oh my God. When I watch like Stuart Gordon movies now, and I watch like whatever, Castle Freak or Reanimator, I'm like, how did they do that? Like, how is there always gore everywhere? And it's like stains everything. I mean, for our set, when you see this movie and you're like, oh, look at this grungy set. No one must have cared. The floors were rented. So like, you couldn't let anything happen to the floor. So if any viscera or any gore dropped, there was always like, what you don't see is all the tarps surrounding everything to make sure nothing touches the floor. And when you see like the Brian Usnas and stuff, you're like, how the hell? You went into someone's house and just like
Dead Alive is a big one.
Or what's the society? What do you call it?
The shunting.
The shunting. Like, you guys baby oiled an entire house. Like, what did you?
I don't know how to do
the
it.
place
And
up.
How does anyone do it?
I mean, even if money was no object, takes a lot of time to clean it up and do it a second take. And these things we have this scene where she's puking like for an hour, just like throwing up like crazy. And so we just like threw down one of these mats, and she's like spitting all the stuff on the rubber mat, and then we just pick up the mat and pour it off, but then it looks like there's like this huge pile of gore. They were the best thing. I was like, what is this, a new invention? Because if this person should be rich, but I don't think they're rich. And I think they're easy to make. Like, if you know how to mix up silicone, you just mix it up with a red food coloring, and then you pour it, and then you let it harden, and then but it's like, I mean, they're translucent. They look so real, and they come in different sizes, and it's the best.
That's a great tip. It's a great tip.
Because then we would shoot.
This podcast brought to you by
bloodhounds.com. Because sometimes there's a shot, there's like the money shot where it's like, well, we really need to see just stuff splattering everywhere in this shot. You wait till the end to shoot that, but you shoot the other coverage earlier with the fake blood so you can clean it up. And then you
smart.
Just tail out your day on the like ruining everything.
When Fede Alvarez did that Evil Dead remake, that was all practical.
Oh yeah,
and that's why that movie is so visceral. And I mean, so good. But they fucked that kitchen up again and again. They had to keep washing it and do another take, and
the money all goes into like Swiffers.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, those are days that's days, on set where it's like, cool, bring in 10 people. They're going to clean it all up. They got to dry everything out.
You need to drain the floor.
You got to change your wardrobe. You got to redo all their makeup. You got to dry their hair. Like, that's just time,
Yeah.
And time is
I
money.
think those were like, for us, or for me anyway, I don't know about you, Chris, but like those were some of the more, I mean, they were fun because they were movie magic days where it's like, look at all the gore and stuff, but they were also super stressful because like our psychic surgery scene where there's blood all over the place and there's a huge prosthetic and the floor's getting messed up and the prosthetic can only take so much and all that stuff. You're just like, oh my God, this is like, we get like one shot to do there or a couple of takes to do this before it's all going to fall apart. Cause now all the blood is staining this thing and that thing. And now nothing's going to match anymore. And we can't afford to change the wardrobe out and stop down. It's like, oh
yeah.
Anyway.
Now, as much as a pet peeve of mine, CGI blood is, I get it. I get why people do it. I can always tell, but I get why people do it. Yeah.
Yeah. We, do we have any in ours? I don't know.
We
maybe one shot.
Really. We have like a little bit of an enhancement. I mean, again, like everything it was all done practically first. And then it's like, if we could just goose it a little bit, then it's like,
there was one time we had to paint out the guys because we just had the guy stick his hand in the shot with a
squirt bottle.
Squirt. So we're like, we got to remove his hand now because we had to squirt it up. But
painted his hand out, which was not easy. But then the squirt of blood like coming up from her stomach, we painted the downstream out, so it's just the upstream, and it's like, oh that's cool looking.
That's awesome.
It's easier to sometimes to remove stuff than to add stuff. And we learned that from Robert Rodriguez from his, what was that thing he called it? The splat gun?
The gore cannon or whatever. Do you know about that?
What was that on Planet Terror?
No, he did it first on
before,
Desperado, and then he did it first on El Mariachi, and then he did it on Desperado as well, where basically instead of having like a squib go off on someone's face, like their whole face explode, he would like shoot like air pressurized gore at their face.
A tube of gore, and he would, like the water, with like a plunger, and you just go.
So it was like imagine just like a gob of spaghetti hitting you in the face, right?
Yep.
But then editorially, he'd remove the 2 frames of it traveling to your face. So all you would see is a normal face, and then immediately like all the spaghetti bouncing off your face.
Brilliant.
So that's something like if you had to make a prosthetic of Quentin Tarantino's head and do a squib to explode it, that would be like an enormous thing. Whereas he would just throw spaghetti at your face. Well, not spaghetti, but and then
putting pyrotechnics on somebody's face isn't like the most.
Yeah, it's like you can't do that. But if you just remove the couple of frames, then it's like, oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah, and you could just
all you're
throw
seeing is the reaction.
Is that one of those 15-minute film schools?
You know what? I think we read Rebel Without a Crew.
Yeah,
and we probably described
so
it there. We were hugely. This podcast is now 3 hours long. I apologize.
No, please. It's the more the merrier.
But we were huge fans of Robert Rodriguez, and just that
because that came out when we were like freshmen, and I mean that book came out when we were freshmen in college.
Oh wow, perfect time.
And I was in film school, and I was like, I read that. It was my summer job between freshman and sophomore year, and I was like, I might quit school. And that's why we did make a movie in college because of that.
Oh wow.
Just knock my microphone over.
Super cheap.
Because he was like, yeah, just go make 3 terrible movies and throw them away.
Right.
So we took that advice a little bit, but yeah, there's a lot of little, you know, guerrilla nuggets in there.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that stuff. I mean, that's the fun of indie filmmaking is like finding the really smart. I mean, that's like the shaky cam from, Sam Raimi or whatever, like all those like super smart, economical ways to do the things that the big dogs are doing.
Yeah.
And you're just like, okay, let's execute this on the level that we can and just put sweat equity into, for us nowadays, it's more sweat equity into the post where it's like, okay, well, we can stabilize the shot later, or we can remove these things. And that's how we're going to do the impossible shot where we can't, always rent the equipment or whatever. And you just have to focus on that. But like, that's all the fun stuff, man.
Yeah. The ingenuity of that movie magic and having to invent ways of doing things less expensively. Yeah. There's the real fun to be had there.
It taps into your kind of puzzle loving brain, that
and I think
makes it fun.
When you see a movie at our level, when you see an indie movie like The Old Ways, and there's like something really remarkable that happens visually. I don't know. Like we have a sequence where somebody kind of levitates for a moment, and it's like done to the best of our abilities. And it's fun to see that. We've only seen it with an audience a couple of times, but you can feel an energy shift because they're like, I was not expecting this level of whatever this is.
Yeah.
And certainly that's the fun of like an indie horror movie where you don't know how far the filmmaker is going to go. You don't know if they're going to like really mess your brain up like Ari Aster or like, Dario Argento would, or Stuart Gordon would, like you don't know what you're in for because there are no rules and there are no guidepost when you get into an indie movie. You know, it hasn't gone through like a marketing team at
Right. All bets are off.
Who's like, testing says people hate this sequence.
Right.
And for us, testing was like, all right, we'll watch it and we'll watch it with some friends. And if they're like, yeah, that's pretty cool, then, we'll go with it. And
that's why that scene, one of the scariest scenes for me ever was not even a horror movie. It was Pulp Fiction, where they were about to plunge the adrenaline into the chest. And I was a big Tarantino fan at the time. And
you're like, what is this going to be?
He's not above cutting someone's ear off. Like, I don't know what
this could go into their eyeball. You don't know what's going to happen.
I was really stressed out during that scene, and then it was just a regular like plunger.
Yeah, to this day, every time I see that scene, and I've seen it 100 times, but the tension of that moment was like 1, 2, and then it just never lets up every time.
One of your listeners has to cross-cut that scene from like that, and then the scene from The Thing where the hands go into the chest, and that's what I want to see. That combo.
That would be awesome. That would be
the two scariest chest sequences.
Yeah, that would be a great mashup. Yeah. Well, he said that Hateful Eight was mostly inspired by The Thing in terms of just like tension and paranoia and all that. When you think about it, there's a lot of that there. Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. That's it. Yeah, like who do you trust and who's the,
who's the real monster? All of that.
Who's the real monster? That's cool.
Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah. Well, guys, this was so cool. I think before we wrap up, I have to show you my death whistle. Hang on one second.
Yeah, please. Let's play it and let's hear it. Play us out.
I have a non-functioning one.
Yeah. I don't think it'll be visually exciting for the podcast listeners.
No. If we zoom in, can we steal whatever movie you're writing back there?
What's that?
Yeah, Act 3 looks a little thin.
Yeah, it's a little thin. It's a little light. Yeah. I got my scenes on the side, and I'm trying to figure out where to put them.
One of the sequences in Act 3 just says credits, and I don't know if that counts as a scene.
Do I have? No, I don't have credits.
Fade out.
It just says Avengers style twist.
Superhero landing.
Coda scene
with Sam Jackson.
Yeah, with Sam Jackson.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Good idea.
This one needs a little work, a little act in progress. Yeah, I think I might start a collection of these. They're so cool.
Can you play it?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, it just shattered the.
Yeah, the decibels must have gone through. No, it started, and then your limiter must have like killed it.
Oh, really?
Try it again.
I'll go a little lower.
And it dies right afterwards. That's
really
amazing.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's how serious the death whistle is.
Your mic, your other mic might be fine, but
it might be. Yeah, the frequency of it. I'm sure the mics just can't handle.
Oh, it's cool because it starts like a scream, and then it's just like like you can tell the microphone's like that's not a human sound.
No, it's the sound of like death.
That's a good one.
That's a really good one.
Well, you've seen this one. I mean, your podcast listeners, please edit all this out. But this is our
Theater of the Mind.
Oh, that's cool. Was that the one from the movie?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. So, you guys should sell those or do some promotional.
And then 3D printed in this incredible, and then also finished with different material on top.
It's really cool. It's like your own kind of Pazuzu,
Yeah.
We had
it's iconic.
A friend of ours sculpted it in ZBrush, and then he has his own 3D printer. He printed it out, and then Derek, our prop guy, he dunk molded it or whatever you call it, and made like 3 or 4 of them and painted them up and everything because they're bound to get dropped and broken. But
that's awesome, dude.
That's the only reason. That's why you make movies, man, is to get to keep the props.
Yeah, that's a cool.
Can we re-edit that other part? The reason where you put the money into props, because that's the cool stuff. Like after
you need to put them on your shelf.
Yeah, it's fun to like make stuff and then keep it.
Yeah, it really is. Like that's the stuff, man.
Yeah.
Like anytime you go to like a Hollywood production office and you're like, where was I? Oh, John. Who's the producer of? He was one of the producers of
Joel Silver.
Predator. No. John Davis. John Davis.
Yeah.
Davis. I went to a meeting in his office and he had a full-size Predator. I was like,
wow,
this is awesome.
Have you
Or
ever?
like-
Do you know Tom and Alec from ADI, from Studio ADI, Amalgamated Dynamics?
I know.
Well, T. Justin Ross knows them,
Yeah.
obviously.
Oh,
They
and
did Mortuary.
Ryan Spindell worked with Alec on
for
Mortuary
Mortuary.
Collection.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah, they
they're
did
like
Morch.
one of the biggest practical effects companies in California. They do all this stuff for Godzilla versus Kong and Jurassic Park. Like they do the big stuff, the Stan Winston level stuff.
We shot their little babies at our stage. The burned baby things from Mortuary.
From Mortuary,
So-
yeah.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool. Their office
very-
is insane.
I know.
You go into their
That is-
conference rooms. They have all the wall paneling from like Alien Resurrection up there.
Oh, and they did the original Tremors, I think.
They did. I think they have one of the. I think they have one of the
Graboids.
Tremors up there. Yeah.
Yeah, those guys are great, man. That is like the movie for me. That's like the old for our movie. We went with Josh and Sierra Russell and Russell Effects, and it's incredible. Like their studio is not too far from our stage, and just going over there and checking it, just looking on the walls, and you're like, dude, this is what I mean. It looks like your backdrop. It's just like, oh my god, there's that head from that thing, and there's that body from that thing, and there's a bat. Whatever. There's just so many cool.
Yeah, we could walk there at lunch and see the progress on the demon and all that stuff.
I was at Tom Holland's house. Tom Holland, the director, not Spider-Man, but the director of Fright Night, and he's got all of the old Fright Night stuff. He's got the huge bat, and it's enormous. It's got like an 8-foot wingspan, and he's got it framed. He's got it in a box, preserved, and he's got Jerry Dandridge's skull. And he's just all of his old. He's got stuff from Thinner, which he also directed. He's got the original Child's Play, Chucky doll. Wow. It's all just hanging around his house. He's like, my wife objects, but I like having all this stuff.
I know.
It's so cool. It's so cool to see all that stuff. Yeah. Well, guys, this was so much fun. Thank you again. Any parting advice for those aspiring filmmakers out there?
Yeah. Don't shoot your first scene first, ever. I tell everybody that. It always is the worst. The first thing you shoot's the worst thing you shoot. So shoot it later, because you don't want that to be your first scene in your movie. Some crappy thing where nobody knows how to pull focus yet or whatever. But,
and then my piece of advice, I guess, is just do the thing you think is cool, because you have to live with it. Like, not only do you have to write it, which takes months, but then you have to live with it and shoot it and defend it to everyone and fight with everyone in the universe about making it. Mm-hmm. So, I think our first movie we made in college, we did because we were like, hey, there's some crappy direct-to-video movies at Blockbuster. I think we can make one of those. And we weren't thinking like, all right, let's make a movie that we will fight for. So
for the next 4 years of our lives. Yeah. I mean, I work on this movie every day. I mean, to this day, we started shooting it February of 2020. Mm-hmm. And it's still every day,
Yeah.
And we prepped before that and we wrote it before that. So it's a commitment. So you better like it.
You better like it, and you better believe in it. And you have to be a force of nature to make a movie at an independent level. Like, nobody is going to and everyone will. Look, we have lots of friends and screenwriter friends and movie maker friends. And I would say most of them were like, I don't know about this movie, guys, before we made it. And then afterwards they're like, I don't know how you did it. It didn't make sense that this movie would make would work at all. Mm-hmm. But we believed in it, and we believed in ourselves. And, you have to be your own, force of nature. Everyone will tell you no. And if you really love it and you really want to do it, just keep fighting for it and to do it.
Yeah. I feel like
but if they're all telling you the same no, then maybe they're right. That's the
If
they all just say you don't know how to write, then maybe if it's just a bunch of random naysayers, that's one thing. But if they're all naysaying the same nay,
I forget who I heard say this, but somebody big said this, where it was like, you can people can tell you no, but as long as they're telling you no, but they're also like, but it's pretty good. It's just no, this isn't great, but it's really good. Then that should be enough encouragement. But if you just keep hearing no, it's not working. No, I don't like it. No, it's bad. And that keeps happening to you, then maybe try something else.
Back to the drawing board after that.
Enough people have to also be encouraging you at the bottom level. And you're like, okay, all right, I think it's still okay. It's just not for everyone yet.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, I forgot to ask also, with the amount of mythology that's in this movie, any chance of a sequel or any sort of Conjuring universe you guys are cooking up, or is that
we would
off topic
love
now?
for that. I mean, we've already broken story on some follow-up stuff, but it's really, at this level, it's like the audience has to show up
Yeah.
and, make it a foregone conclusion that we got to do this. So if they do, it should be out right now on Netflix. If it performs well in the first, 3-4 weeks, apparently that's the sweet spot for Netflix, and not we're used to like the opening weekend type stuff that you are with theatrical stuff. So, if it blows up, and they'll probably call us up and say, you want to do another? Because but if it doesn't, then no.
It's gotta perform. That's the gamble you take when you kind of make your own indie movies. But yeah, certainly if there's an audience out there, I think there is. I hope there is.
Sure,
if there's an audience for it, then we would love to keep exploring this universe. That was,
I feel like we barely scratched the surface with Mexican folk horror. There's so much more. You look at older Mexican horror movies, like there's so much to be, so much more to be explored.
It's a very big place.
Yeah.
There's a lot of history.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, guys, thank you again. This was so much fun, and congrats on the movie. I enjoyed the hell out of it, and I actually am really looking forward to seeing it again. There's so much in there. There's so many layers to it. I feel like I didn't catch it all the first go around. So, really psyched to see it a second time, and congrats again.
Really appreciate it. Thanks a bunch.
Of course. All right. As always, here are some key takeaways from this conversation with Marcos and Chris. Number 1, lead your movie with fresh takes on tired concepts. It's very difficult to do anything truly unique in the horror space these days. Zombies have been done to death, as have vampires, ghosts, witches, and definitely demonic possession. But what we haven't seen, or at least I haven't seen, is an exorcism movie based on ancient Mexican tradition. That is completely new, and one of the reasons Marcos' script for The Old Ways feels so fresh. Despite the fact that all of these genres have become so exhausted, it doesn't mean fans don't want more movies. They just don't want the same homogenized storylines that have become cliche. If you're approaching a well-trodden path like a zombie, werewolf, vampire movie, make sure you put a completely new and different spin on it, either culturally or socially. For other great examples of this, check out The Vigil, The Boys of County Hell, His House, or Atlantics, all of which are awesome watches. Number 2, lean into folk horror. Just about every culture has a treasure trove of supernatural mythology, but sadly, there really aren't many folk horror movies out there. When writing The Old Ways, Marcos drew upon a ton of history and mythology from the Mexican culture, all of which culminated to make The Old Ways not only unique, but resonant. There's something naturally more believable about mythological archetypes and real folklore in horror movies. It somehow feels familiar to people. Whether it's because these stories are in the collective unconscious or just really, really cool is anybody's guess. But when integrated properly, they have a grounding effect on the movie, which makes it more believable and therefore more compelling. Dig into mythology and folklore to discover your own unique horror concepts. Number 3. Time on set is your most valuable currency. Budget accordingly. When it comes to good filmmaking, things take time. Getting that great performance, lighting that killer shot, or perfecting that practical effects gag so it's just right. All of these things take time to do right, which is why it's critical to make sure you have enough time on set. Indie filmmakers are typically in a constant rush against the clock, but budgeting more time on set means you can take the time to do things right, because good things always take time. Chris articulated this beautifully when he made the comparison between footage versus cinema. Footage can be done instantly and on a strict schedule, but cinema, the real art of film as a language, takes time. One way to save time that Chris recommended is to pre-visualize and literally pre-shoot your scenes through simulations so that you can work out the kinks ahead of time. You can do this with something sophisticated like Maya or the Unreal Engine like Chris does, or with something as simple as action figures. Doing these shot rehearsals can really help advise what you need to get on the day in ways that storyboards just can't. Ultimately, this saves you a lot of time on set, which, as we discussed, is your greatest currency. Number 4, your cast and crew need their rest to do their best. Chris recommends 5-day weeks instead of 6-day weeks. According to him, you should always opt for more days on set and skimp everywhere else. Consider this when budgeting your movie. Do you really need trailers? Do you really need 8 costume changes? Can you sacrifice 2 characters for an extra 3 days on set? Whatever it takes, it's worth it to maximize your production time. Now, admittedly, this may run counter to the Roger Corman hustle ethic of filmmaking, but so be it. There's definitely a little bit of an over-romanticization of hustle culture in filmmaking. Shooting till 4 a.m., your crew hating you, and yes, sometimes that's exactly what you have to do and what happens. But if you're in a position to avoid that, avoid it, because rested and happier crews ultimately make better movies. Anyway, guys, thank you as always for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, why not share it with your friends and family on social media? Don't forget to follow the show on Instagram at I'm Nick Taylor and on Twitter at the same handle. Thanks again for listening to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Hey guys, one last thing before you head out. If you haven't already, don't forget to check out my 10x10 horror watch list. How would you like a list of the 10 favorite horror movies of 10 of your favorite horror directors? Well, I just hooked your ass up. The 10x10 horror watch list features a breakdown of the 10 favorite horror movies from 10 renowned horror directors, including Ari Aster, James Gunn, Quentin Tarantino, Jordan Peele, Martin Scorsese, and many, many more, all in an easy-to-reference PDF. You can download this guide for free as my gift to my dear listeners at nicktaylor.com/horror guide. That's nicktaylor.com/horror guide. Check it out and let me know what you think.